The sharp sound of Victoria's laughter sliced through the thick, smoky atmosphere of O'Malley's tavern like a dull blade. I had heard that laugh countless times before, but on this particular night it carried a different tone, crueler, more intentional. "Stop pretending we're husband and wife, Marcus," she yelled across the packed tavern, her voice rising above the blaring jukebox and the scattered conversations around the pool tables. "You have no right to tell me where I go or who I spend my time with." Every single person in the Friday night crowd turned their heads to watch. Jessica, Victoria's best friend since their college days, snickered behind her cosmopolitan glass. Even Patricia from Human Resources was grinning, her phone already positioned to capture this moment for her social media followers. 23 people witnessed my public disgrace that night, and I made sure to remember each and every face. My name is Marcus Sullivan, and I suppose you could call me a traditional man trapped in a modern marriage. 38 years old, former professional fighter turned general contractor, married to a technology marketing director who earns double my salary and never hesitates to remind me of that fact. On that particular Friday night at O'Malley's, something deep inside me finally broke completely. I forced myself to smile and lifted my beer bottle toward her. "You're completely right, darling. My apologies." Inside my mind, though, a frigid voice whispered a reminder. "I guess she's forgotten who makes the monthly mortgage payments on that Victorian house she adores so much." Victoria stumbled away from her bar stool, her designer heels clicking sharply against the grimy floor. "I'm leaving for the weekend. Girls get away to Portland. Don't bother waiting up for me." Jessica wrapped her arm tightly around Victoria's waist, both of them swaying unsteadily on their feet. "We're going to have an amazing time, aren't we, Victoria?" "The absolute best," Victoria slurred her words, refusing to even glance in my direction. Finally, some quality time away from all this pathetic small-town garbage. Monica, the veteran bartender who had been pouring drinks in this establishment for 15 years, caught my eye and shook her head with genuine sympathy. She had witnessed plenty of marriages crumble right here at O'Malley's over the years, and mine was simply the latest victim. As my wife and her group of friends stumbled toward the exit door, I heard Jessica's voice drift back across the room. "I honestly can't believe you actually went through with marrying him. What on earth were you thinking?" "Temporary loss of sanity," Victoria replied loudly enough for half the tavern to hear clearly. "But don't you worry, I'm correcting that terrible mistake very soon." The door slammed shut behind them with force, leaving me sitting alone with my beer and the uncomfortable stares of everyone who had just witnessed my humiliation. Old Mrs. Henderson, my elderly neighbor who inexplicably always found herself at O'Malley's on Friday nights, slid onto the empty stool beside me. "That girl has been running around on you for several months now, sweetheart," she said in a quiet voice, her wrinkled hands wrapped firmly around a whiskey neat. "Absolutely everyone in town knows about it except you. Is that right?" I maintained my level tone, though inside that cold voice was steadily growing louder and more insistent. "Brandon Mitchell, that wealthy tech entrepreneur with the fancy electric car. I've seen them together at his downtown penthouse more times than I can possibly count." Mrs. Henderson's eyes sparkled with malicious delight in spreading gossip. "She parks her car 2 full blocks away from his building. She honestly thinks nobody notices." Brandon Mitchell. I recognized that name immediately. Wealthy, arrogant business owner who had made his fortune selling some trendy application to a major tech company. The type of man who wore custom-tailored suits and treated service workers like they were beneath him. Everything that I was not, everything I would never be. "Thanks for sharing that information," I said calmly, draining the rest of my beer. "What exactly are you planning to do about this situation?" Mrs. Henderson asked with eager anticipation. I stood up from my stool, threw a $20 bill onto the bar surface, and looked down at Mrs. Henderson's expectant expression. Nothing less than what she deserves. The drive back to my house took exactly 12 minutes. 12 focused minutes to carefully plan the opening phase of what would ultimately become the most satisfying revenge of my entire life. Victoria wanted to pretend we weren't actually married to each other. Absolutely perfect. I would give her precisely what she had requested. Our house stood prominently on Elmwood Street, a beautifully converted Victorian that I had personally spent 3 solid years renovating with my own 2 hands. Every single board, every single nail, every single coat of paint had been my work. Victoria had selected colors and chosen furniture pieces, but I had built our home from the foundation upward. My name appeared alone on the property deed. My hard-earned money had financed all the renovations. My blood and sweat had transformed it into something beautiful. I parked my truck in the driveway and sat motionless for a long moment, staring up at the dark windows above. Tomorrow morning, absolutely everything would change dramatically. But tonight, I had important work to accomplish. The first phone call went directly to my lawyer, Thomas Anderson. Thomas had handled all my business contracts for years, and more importantly, he maintained availability 24 hours daily for genuine emergencies. Marcus. It's well past midnight. What's happened? I need to protect my financial assets, Thomas. Tonight, immediately. How quickly can you freeze all joint accounts? Jesus Christ, what's going on? My wife just publicly announced that she's not really married to me. I'm choosing to take her at her exact word. Thomas remained silent for a brief moment, processing this information. How much concrete evidence do you possess regarding infidelity? Working on gathering that, but I need those accounts completely locked down before she attempts to drain them. I can file emergency paperwork first thing Monday morning, but Marcus, are you absolutely certain about this course of action? Once we begin down this particular road, she started down this road several months ago, Thomas. I'm simply catching up to where she's been. After disconnecting with Thomas, I proceeded to make 3 additional phone calls. The locksmith who had installed our comprehensive security system owed me a substantial favor from when I had renovated his entire kitchen completely free of charge. He readily agreed to come by Sunday morning with no questions asked. The bank manager was someone I had attended high school with years ago, and he promised to expedite all the necessary paperwork to remove Victoria's access from her joint accounts. The third call went directly to my construction foreman, Nathan, who had extensive connections throughout the entire city and unfortunately possessed a mouth bigger than the harbor itself. You need dirt on Brandon Mitchell. Nathan's gravelly voice crackled through my phone speaker. That pompous, arrogant fool. Give me exactly 24 hours. What specific kind of dirt are we talking about? The kind that completely ruins reputations and destroys careers. Trust me on this, boss. Rich boys like Mitchell always have hidden skeletons in their closets. By 3 o'clock in the morning, I had formulated a complete plan. By Sunday night, I would have claimed back my life, and by the end of this month, both Victoria and Brandon would fully understand what happened when someone made the mistake of publicly humiliating Marcus Sullivan. I poured myself 3 generous fingers of bourbon and settled onto the front porch, watching the empty, silent street before me. Mrs. Henderson's house remained dark, but I knew with certainty she was probably peeking through her curtains right now, eagerly waiting to see what would happen next. The elderly woman practically lived for drama, and I was about to provide her with the show of a lifetime. You want to know where you're free to go, Victoria? I said quietly into the night air surrounding me. Anywhere at all, except right here in my home. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling steadily, which was typical weather for coastal Maine during October. I woke up sprawled on the couch with a bourbon-induced headache and an absolutely crystal-clear sense of purpose burning inside me. Victoria's girls' weekend trip provided the perfect opportunity to carefully set my trap. First stop was Riley's boxing gymnasium on Harbor Street. Riley Thompson had trained me years back when I genuinely believed I might turn professional, before I ultimately discovered I possessed more talent for building structures than breaking faces. Now he operated the grittiest gymnasium in the entire city, a place where ex-convicts and privileged college students learned to respect each other through shared physical pain and discipline. You look absolutely terrible, Riley observed as I walked through the entrance door. At 65 years old, he remained built like a solid fire hydrant, all compact muscle and accumulated scars and pure attitude. Marriage troubles, you could say that. I wrapped my hands carefully and began working the heavy bag, allowing each punch to carry away some portion of my building anger. Victoria decided to announce to an entire bar last night that we're not actually married to each other. Ouch. That's brutal. Riley held the bag perfectly steady as I unleashed a powerful combination that would have dropped most grown men. What are you planning to do about this situation? Hit back, but strategically smart. Smart how exactly? I stopped punching momentarily and looked directly at him. You remember what you used to constantly tell me about fighting much bigger opponents? Use their own weight and momentum against them. Let them overextend themselves, then counter hard. Precisely correct. Victoria genuinely thinks she's far more intelligent than me. Brandon believes his wealth makes him completely untouchable. They're both about to learn a very painful lesson about how wrong they are.
Riley grinned widely, displaying teeth that had been thoroughly rearranged by 30 solid years of professional boxing. You need any help with this? Just keep your ears open around town. This situation is going to become very interesting very quickly. After leaving the gymnasium, I drove downtown directly to O'Malley's Tavern. Saturday afternoons maintained a slow pace, featuring just a handful of regulars nursing their hangovers while watching college football games. Monica was working the day shift, methodically polishing glasses and pretending not to actively listen to every conversation happening around her. Rough night last night, she commented as I settled onto a bar stool. Getting significantly better by the hour, actually. What do you know about Brandon Mitchell? Monica's eyes immediately lit up with interest. Bartenders functioned exactly like priests in many ways. Everyone eventually confessed their sins to them, and they remembered absolutely everything they heard. Rich boy with aggressively wandering hands and an oversized mouth. Tips poorly when he bothers tipping at all. Treats all the staff like we're his personal servants. Why are you asking? He's been having an affair with my wife. I'm curious about his regular habits and patterns. Ah, I see. Monica leaned closer across the bar, deliberately lowering her voice. He comes in here every Tuesday night, usually accompanied by different women each week. Constantly brags about his various business deals. Name drops celebrities he's absolutely never actually met. Classic insecure rich guy behavior at its finest. What kind of business deals does he discuss? Real estate primarily. Buying up old buildings throughout downtown, converting them all to luxury condominiums. But here's the truly interesting part. He's been loudly bragging about some major acquisition that's supposedly going to make him dramatically wealthier. Something specifically involving waterfront property development. I carefully filed that valuable information away in my mind. Anyone else he regularly brings around here? Your wife, obviously, but also this blonde woman who works for the city planning office.
They appeared extremely cozy together last month when I saw them. Corruption added to adultery. Even better ammunition for completely destroying someone's reputation and career. Thanks, Monica. Please keep this entire conversation strictly between us. What conversation are you referring to? She winked knowingly and moved down the bar to serve another waiting customer. Sunday morning arrived, and Tommy the locksmith showed up at exactly 8 o'clock sharp. He was a small, perpetually nervous man who had been genuinely grateful for the kitchen renovation I had completed for him free of charge after his wife abandoned him. You absolutely sure about this, Marcus? Changing all the locks while your wife's away from home. That's extremely serious business we're talking about. She made it perfectly clear we're not married to each other, Tommy. I'm simply taking her at her own word. The complete job took 2 full hours. Every single lock in the house got changed. Front door, back door, basement entrance, garage, even the storage shed. New deadbolts, new keys, completely new security codes for everything. While Tommy worked methodically, I packed all of Victoria's belongings into cardboard boxes. Not vindicatively or carelessly, just efficiently and thoroughly. Clothes, shoes, makeup, jewelry, personal items. Absolutely everything that belonged to her got packed away. Mrs. Henderson appeared prominently at her kitchen window around noon, watching these proceedings with completely undisguised fascination. I waved cheerfully at her, and she actually waved back enthusiastically. The elderly gossip was definitely going to have a spectacular field day with this developing story. At 2 o'clock, Nathan arrived carrying a thick manila folder stuffed with papers. Brandon Mitchell's complete life story, he announced proudly, settling his massive 6'4" frame into my kitchen chair. Nathan was built exactly like a professional linebacker, with hands the size of dinner plates and a surprisingly sharp, strategic mind. This boy's been extremely busy with questionable activities. What did you manage to find? 3 separate building code violations that he systematically covered up with direct bribes to officials. 2 formal sexual harassment complaints that mysteriously disappeared without resolution. And here's the absolute best part. He's been actively using multiple shell companies to purchase property with dirty money from questionable sources. Dirty how exactly? Classic money laundering for out-of-state investors with organized crime connections. Nothing the FBI could immediately prove in court, but definitely enough damaging information to completely destroy his reputation if it got publicly released. I carefully flipped through the extensive documents he had compiled. Bank records, property transfers, photographs of Brandon meeting with known criminals. How did you possibly manage to obtain all this sensitive information? I've got friends in extremely low places, boss. And Brandon Mitchell has made countless enemies throughout this city. Turns out rich boys who routinely screw over contractors and cheat extensively on their taxes don't inspire much loyalty from people. Perfect work. What about those harassment complaints you mentioned? One victim was a waitress at O'Malley's, actually Monica's younger cousin. The other was a city planning office clerk. Both women got paid substantial amounts to keep completely quiet about their experiences. The pieces were systematically falling into place in my mind. Brandon wasn't simply an adulterer cheating on his partners. He was an active criminal engaged in multiple illegal activities. And criminals remained vulnerable in ways that merely wealthy boys were not. There's additional information you should know, Nathan continued seriously. Mitchell's been actively telling people around town that he's planning to marry some tech executive woman and move permanently to California. Apparently, he's already put down a substantial payment on an expensive house in Silicon Valley. My blood went ice cold in my veins. When is this move supposedly happening? End of November. As soon as his current business deals close successfully. So this affair wasn't simply casual cheating. This represented a carefully planned exit strategy for both of them. Victoria and Brandon had been actively planning to run away together, probably taking as much of my money as they could possibly steal in the process. The public humiliation at O'Malley's had been merely the opening move in a much larger game they were playing. Thanks for everything, Nathan. Send complete copies of all this documentation to my lawyer immediately. What's the overall plan here, boss? I stared out my kitchen window at Mrs. Henderson's house, where the elderly woman was still watching vigilantly from behind her curtains. We're going to give this entire town something truly memorable to talk about for years to come. Sunday evening arrived, and I sat calmly on my front porch with a cold beer, waiting patiently. Victoria's car pulled into the driveway at precisely 7:30, exactly on her usual schedule. She appeared tanned and relaxed, probably from spending the entire weekend in Brandon's bed instead of Portland with her girlfriends like she had claimed. She attempted to use her key in the front door lock. It refused to work. She tried again repeatedly, jiggling the handle with increasing frustration. Nothing budged. "Marcus," she shouted loudly, pounding her fists against the door. "Marcus, what the hell is wrong with this lock?" I didn't respond verbally, simply sat there drinking my beer calmly, watching her panic escalate. "I know you're inside there. Open this door right now." Mrs. Henderson's front door opened dramatically, and the elderly woman stepped onto her porch wearing her bathrobe and slippers. "He changed all the locks, sweetheart," she called out cheerfully across the yards. "Around noon today. Had a professional locksmith and everything." Victoria spun around abruptly, her face flushed dark with anger. "What are you talking about, you old busybody?" "Well, you very clearly stated you weren't married to him anymore, so I suppose he figured you didn't need keys to his house any longer." "This is my house too," Victoria shouted back. "Is it really though?" Mrs. Henderson's voice carried that sweet venom that only elderly women who had been waiting years for this exact moment could produce. "Because I distinctly heard you tell that entire bar Friday night that you weren't really married to each other. Maybe you should call your boyfriend instead. I'm absolutely certain he's got room for you at his place." Victoria's mouth opened and closed repeatedly like a fish gasping. She looked at her car, then back at the house, then at Mrs. Henderson's grinning face. Finally, she looked upward at me sitting calmly on the porch above.
"You absolutely cannot do this to me," she said, her voice shaking. I stood up slowly, walked deliberately to the porch railing, and looked down at her standing in my driveway. "You're completely right about something. I can't tell you where to go or who to spend your time with. But I also don't have any obligation to provide you a place to come back to afterward. This is absolutely insane. I was just drunk on Friday night. You know perfectly well I didn't mean any of it. Funny thing about truth, Victoria. It has a persistent way of coming out when people's guards are down and alcohol loosens their tongues."
She attempted a different approach, deliberately softening her voice to sound vulnerable. "Marcus, please, let's talk about this inside like adults. We can work this out together. We can definitely talk. But not inside my house. That's my property now, solely mine. You made it extremely clear that we're not actually married to each other. So you don't live here anymore, effective immediately. Where am I supposed to go then? I smiled genuinely for the first time in several days. Anywhere at all except here. Isn't that precisely what you wanted? Complete freedom. Victoria stood frozen in the driveway for another 10 full minutes, alternating desperately between angry threats and pathetic pleas. I didn't move from my position on the porch. Finally, she climbed back into her car and drove away rapidly, tires squealing loudly against the wet pavement. Mrs. Henderson remained on her porch, practically vibrating with excitement. That was significantly better than cable television, she called out enthusiastically. What happens next in this drama? Now the real fun begins, I replied calmly. That was only round one. This fight is far from over. Monday morning brought the kind of crisp October weather that genuinely made living in Maine worthwhile. I arrived at my construction site by 6:30, pouring steaming coffee from my thermos and watching the sunrise paint the harbor in shades of orange and gold. My crew wouldn't arrive for another hour, giving me valuable time to think strategically and plan my next moves. My phone had been buzzing constantly all night with text messages from Victoria, ranging from furious anger to pathetic pleading to threatening legal action. I had read them all carefully, but hadn't responded to a single one. Let her wonder what I was thinking and planning. Uncertainty functioned as a powerful weapon, and I fully intended to use it effectively. At 8 sharp, Thomas Anderson called with encouraging news. Emergency injunction granted, he said. All joint accounts are now frozen pending formal divorce proceedings. She can't touch a single penny without explicit court approval. How long will that process take? Weeks, possibly months. Depends entirely on how nasty this situation gets. But Marcus, I have to warn you seriously. She's already hired Rebecca Walsh as her attorney. I whistled low. Rebecca Walsh was the most expensive and ruthless divorce attorney in the entire state, known for absolutely destroying husbands and taking half of everything they owned. How can she possibly afford Walsh if all the accounts are frozen? Excellent question. Either she's got money stashed somewhere we don't know about, or someone else is paying her substantial legal fees. Brandon had to be funding it, which meant they were far more serious about their relationship than I had initially thought. What's my exposure here? The house is in your name only, and you can definitively prove you personally paid for all renovations. Most of your business assets are properly protected. But Marcus, if she can prove you locked her out maliciously without cause, a judge might not look favorably on those actions. She announced to a bar full of witnesses that we weren't married. I've got 23 people who directly heard her say it. That's good, solid evidence. Document absolutely everything from this point forward. And Marcus, be extremely careful. Walsh doesn't just win cases. She systematically destroys people. After disconnecting, I called Nathan and told him to spread the word carefully. Anyone who had been at O'Malley's Friday night needed to write down exactly what they had heard Victoria say, word for word with dates and times. This was going to become a war of documentation. The morning flew by rapidly in a blur of concrete pours and electrical inspections. Around noon, Patricia from Victoria's company appeared unexpectedly at the job site. She was a quiet woman in her 30s who worked in human resources and had always seemed intimidated by Victoria's aggressive personality. Marcus, can I talk to you privately? She asked nervously. We walked away from the crew over to a stack of lumber where we couldn't be overheard by anyone. I probably shouldn't be here, Patricia said, glancing around nervously. But I thought you should know something. Victoria's telling everyone at work that you're abusive, that you locked her out and threatened her. Is that what she's saying? She came in this morning with some elaborate story about how you've been controlling and violent, and she finally stood up to you. She's got people feeling sorry for her. I nodded, not surprised by this tactic. What do you think, Patricia? In the 3 years you've known us, have I ever seemed abusive? God, no. If anything, you've been too patient with her. The way she talks about you at office parties. Patricia trailed off, looking uncomfortable. What does she say? That you're beneath her. That she married down and regrets it. That she's planning to upgrade to someone more suitable. Upgrade. Like I was a used car she wanted to trade in. Has she mentioned Brandon Mitchell? Patricia's eyes widened. How did you? Yes. She's been bragging about him for months. Says he's everything you're not. Rich, sophisticated, connected. She even showed US pictures of his penthouse on her phone. Pictures on her phone. The two of them together. She wasn't exactly subtle about it. This was better than I had hoped. Patricia, would you be willing to testify about what you've heard in court if necessary? I could lose my job. You could also help prevent an innocent man from being destroyed by false accusations. She was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with her conscience. She's been horrible to work with lately. Arrogant, demanding, treating everyone like servants. And the things she said about you. Patricia looked up at me with something like pity. Yes, I'll testify. Someone needs to tell the truth. That afternoon, I drove downtown to Brandon's building. The Mitchell development offices occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse, all glass and steel and expensive furniture. I didn't go inside, just sat in my truck across the street watching. At 4:30, Brandon emerged from the building with Victoria beside him. Even from a distance, I could see his smug expression, the way he put his hand on her back possessively. They got into his Tesla and drove toward the waterfront district. I followed at a discreet distance, curious to see where they'd go. They parked outside Chez Laurent, the most expensive restaurant in the city. Through the window, I watched them settle into a corner booth, heads close together, obviously planning something. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop following us or I'll call the police. Brandon. Interesting. He'd noticed my truck. That suggested either paranoia or guilt. Probably both. I texted back, public streets, public restaurants. But thanks for confirming you're together. No response. Tuesday evening, I was back at O'Malley's bar, nursing a beer and listening to Monica's valuable gossip. The place was busier than usual. Word had gotten out about Victoria's public humiliation, and people were coming by hoping for more drama. Your wife's been calling here, Monica said, wiping down the bar. Asking if you come in regularly, what you drink, who you talk to. Sounds like she's building a case. What did you tell her? That you're a gentleman who minds his own business and tips well. Unlike some people I could mention. Brandon Mitchell. Bingo. He was in here again last night, drunk and bragging about some big score he's planning. Said he's going to own half the waterfront by Christmas. Did he say how? Something about inside information from the city planning office. And get this, he kept talking about his beautiful new partner and how they're going to California together. I felt that cold anger building again. He said partner. Business partner, life partner. He wasn't clear, but he was definitely talking about a woman. And from the way he described her, it sounded like your wife. So they weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future together. Probably using information Victoria had access to through her tech company's city contracts combined with Brandon's development connections. A classic insider trading scheme. Monica, do you remember exactly what he said about the city planning office? Something about having a friend there who tells him which properties are coming up for development before the information goes public. He buys them cheap, then sells them for huge profits when the development plans are announced. That's illegal. Sure is. But proving it's another matter. I finished my beer and left a 20 on the bar. Thanks for the information. Anytime, honey. And Marcus, be careful. Brandon Mitchell's got connections, and your wife's got a mean streak. That's a dangerous combination. Wednesday morning, Nathan arrived at the job site with more intelligence. I found Mitchell's weak spot, he announced, grinning like a shark. The man's got an ego the size of Texas and the common sense of a goldfish. What do you mean? He can't keep his mouth shut. Been bragging all over town about his business deals, his women, his plans. Half the city knows he's sleeping with your wife. That's not necessarily a weakness. It is when he's also bragging about bribing city officials and laundering money. I've got 3 different people who heard him admit to crimes. All we need is someone willing to wear a wire. I thought about that. Too risky. If he finds out, he'll disappear, and Victoria with him. So what's the plan? I looked out at the harbor where fishing boats were heading out for the day's catch. We're going to let Brandon Mitchell destroy himself. And we're going to make sure everyone's watching when he does it. How? By giving him exactly what he wants, a chance to show off in front of the whole city. The Waterfront Festival was coming up in 2 weeks, the biggest social event of the year, where all the city's elite gathered to see and be seen. Brandon would never miss an opportunity to network and show off his wealth. And if I played this right, it would be the perfect stage for his downfall. Nathan, I need you to spread some rumors. Quietly, carefully. Let it slip that I'm planning to make some kind of public announcement at the festival. Something about Victoria and Brandon. What kind of announcement? Doesn't matter. Let people's imaginations fill in the details. The important thing is that Brandon hears about it and decides he needs to be there to control the narrative. You want him at the festival. I want him center stage. Because that's where I'm going to destroy him. Thursday afternoon, my plan got an unexpected boost. Mrs. Henderson knocked on my door, practically vibrating with excitement. You need to see this, she said, holding up her phone. I was taking pictures of my garden this morning, and look what I caught. The photo showed Brandon's Tesla parked in my driveway at 7 in the morning, with Brandon and Victoria clearly visible through the windshield. They were obviously casing the house, probably planning some kind of break-in or evidence planting. Mrs. Henderson, you're a treasure. Can you send me that photo? Already did. And I called the police to report suspicious activity. Officer Rodriguez said he'd increase patrols in the neighborhood. Perfect. Now Brandon and Victoria knew they were being watched, which would make them more desperate and more likely to make mistakes. That evening, I got a call from Thomas Anderson. We have a problem, he said. Rebecca Walsh is claiming you've been stalking her client and making threats. She's asking for a restraining order. Based on what evidence? Photos of your truck outside Brandon Mitchell's building. Text messages. The fact that you changed the locks. The truck was on a public street. The text was a response to his message. And changing the locks was protecting my property. I know that, and you know that. But Walsh is good at spinning narratives. We need to be more careful. How careful? No more surveillance. No more contact with Victoria or Brandon. Let them make the next move. I agreed, but privately I knew the surveillance phase was over anyway. I had all the information I needed. Now it was time to set the trap and wait for them to walk into it. Friday night, exactly 1 week after Victoria's public humiliation, I was back at O'Malley's bar. The same crowd, the same atmosphere, but everything had changed. People looked at me differently now, with respect instead of pity, curiosity instead of dismissal. Monica poured my usual beer without being asked. How are you holding up? Better every day. Any word from our mutual friends? Brandon was in Tuesday night, but he seemed nervous. Kept looking over his shoulder, checking his phone. And he wasn't bragging as much as usual. Interesting. What about Victoria? Haven't seen her. But Jessica was in yesterday asking questions about you. Wanted to know if you'd been talking to anyone, making plans. Jessica, Victoria's loyal sidekick, always ready to stir up drama. What did you tell her? Same thing I tell everyone. You're a stand-up guy who deserves better. I raised my beer in a toast. Here's to getting what we deserve. Amen to that. As I sat there, surrounded by the low hum of conversation and the clink of glasses, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in months. The trap was set. The players were in position. And in 1 week, at the Waterfront Festival, everyone would see what happened when you underestimated Marcus Sullivan. The joke was about to be on them. The morning of the Waterfront Festival dawned clear and bright, with the kind of crisp October air that made the harbor sparkle like diamonds. I stood on my front porch with my coffee, watching the early setup cruise string lights and arrange vendor booths along the waterfront. Tonight, half the city would gather for food, music, and the kind of social networking that kept small towns running. Tonight, Brandon Mitchell and Victoria would learn what public humiliation really felt like. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Everything's ready, boss. You sure about this? I typed back, never been more sure of anything. The plan was simple, which made it beautiful. Brandon's ego wouldn't let him miss the festival, especially if he thought I might cause a scene. He'd want to be there to control the narrative, to play the victim if necessary. Victoria would be with him, playing the role of the wronged woman who'd finally found true love. They had no idea what was waiting for them. At noon, I drove to Riley's gym for one last workout. Physical activity helped me think, and I needed my mind sharp for tonight. Riley was waiting with the heavy bag and a knowing smile. "Big night tonight," he said, holding the bag steady as I warmed up with light jabs. "Could be. You nervous?" I threw a hard right cross that made the bag jump.
Excited. Good. Nervous fighters make mistakes. Excited fighters win fights. We worked for an hour, drilling combinations and footwork. Boxing had taught me patience, strategy, and the importance of waiting for the right moment to strike. Tonight was my moment. At 4 o'clock, I went home to shower and change. I chose my clothes carefully: dark jeans, white button-down shirt, navy blazer. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed for attention. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a workingman who belonged in this community. Mrs. Henderson was on her porch when I left the house, dressed in her Sunday best and carrying a small purse. "You clean up nice, dear," she said. "Going to the festival? Wouldn't miss it." "Oh, I'll be there. Front row seat for whatever's going to happen." Her eyes twinkled with anticipation. "This is better than my soap operas." The festival was in full swing when I arrived at 6:30. The waterfront park was packed with families, couples, and groups of friends enjoying the food trucks, craft vendors, and live music. The main stage sat at the center of it all, where local bands would perform throughout the evening. I spotted Brandon and Victoria almost immediately. They were holding court near the wine tent, surrounded by a small crowd of admirers and hangers-on. Brandon wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Victoria had on a red dress that hugged her curves and drew appreciative glances from every man in sight. They looked perfect together, wealthy, attractive, successful. The kind of power couple that small cities love to celebrate. Jessica was there too, along with Patricia from Victoria's office and several other people I recognized from O'Malley's bar. The whole cast was assembled for the final act. I bought a beer from the nearest vendor and found a spot near the stage where I could watch without being obvious about it. Nathan appeared beside me, looking uncomfortable in a clean shirt and tie. "They're here," he said quietly.
"I see them. Everything ready. Monica's got the sound system handled. Mrs. Henderson's got her phone ready to record. And I've got 3 guys positioned around the crowd to make sure nobody interferes." "Perfect. What about the evidence? Copies distributed to the right people?" "Your lawyer's got everything, and there are backup copies in safe places." I nodded, feeling that familiar pre-fight calm settling over me. "Then let's give this town a show they'll never forget." At 7:30, the current band finished their set and the festival organizer took the microphone to introduce the next act. That was my cue. I walked toward the stage, moving through the crowd with purpose. People noticed me coming. Conversation stopped, heads turned, and I could feel the electricity of anticipation building. "Excuse me," I said to the organizer, a nervous little man named Peter who ran the Chamber of Commerce. "I'd like to make a brief announcement before the next band." "Oh, I don't know, Marcus. We've got a tight schedule. It'll just take a minute." "Community announcement. Very important." Peter looked uncertain, but he handed me the microphone. The crowd had gone quiet, sensing drama. I could see Brandon and Victoria pushing through the people, trying to get closer to the stage. I stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. Hundreds of people, all waiting to see what Marcus Sullivan had to say. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I want to thank you all for coming out tonight to support our community. This festival represents everything that makes our city great: neighbors coming together, local businesses thriving, and the kind of connections that keep small towns strong." There were murmurs of agreement from the crowd. So far, so good. I also want to take this opportunity to clear up some confusion that's been going around lately. You see, there have been some rumors about my marriage, and I think it's important to set the record straight. I could see Brandon and Victoria near the front of the crowd now. Brandon's face was red with anger, and he was pushing forward like he wanted to rush the stage. Victoria looked pale and frightened. Last Friday night at O'Malley's bar, my wife Victoria made an announcement to everyone present. She said, and I quote, "Stop pretending we're husband and wife, Marcus. You have no right to tell me where I go or who I spend my time with." A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. People were pulling out their phones, recording everything. Now, I was confused by this statement because I thought we were married. We had a ceremony, signed papers, the whole thing. But Victoria seemed very certain that we weren't really married. So I decided to take her at her word. Brandon was shouting something, but the crowd noise drowned him out. Security, actually Nathan and 2 of his friends, moved to block his path to the stage. It turns out Victoria was right about one thing. She should be free to go where she wants and be with who she wants. And she's been exercising that freedom for months now with Brandon Mitchell, a local businessman who specializes in luxury real estate development. Now the crowd was buzzing with excitement. This was better than reality television. Brandon and Victoria have been planning quite a future together. They're moving to California, where Brandon has already put money down on a house. But here's the interesting part, they've been financing their romance with some creative business practices. I pulled out a folder of documents, copies of everything Nathan had gathered. Brandon Mitchell has been using inside information from city planning officials to buy properties before development plans are announced publicly. That's called insider trading, and it's illegal. He's also been accepting money from out-of-state investors with questionable backgrounds, which is called money laundering. Brandon was screaming now, his face purple with rage. That's slander. I'll sue you for everything you have. I smiled and held up my phone. Actually, Brandon, it's all documented. Bank records, property transfers, witness statements. Including recordings of you bragging about your crimes at Murphy's Bar. The crowd had gone completely silent now, hanging on every word. But the best part is how Brandon and Victoria have been working together. Victoria's tech company has contracts with the city, giving her access to planning documents and development schedules. She's been feeding that information to Brandon, who uses it to make profitable investments. It's a classic corruption scheme. Victoria finally found her voice. This is insane. Marcus, you're making this up because you're jealous. Am I? I held up Mrs. Henderson's phone, showing the photo of Brandon's Tesla in my driveway. Then explain why Brandon was casing my house Thursday morning. Were you planning to plant evidence, steal documents, or just intimidate me into staying quiet? The crowd turned to look at Brandon and Victoria, who were trapped in the middle of hundreds of hostile faces. Jessica tried to push forward to help her friend, but she was blocked by the press of bodies. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, I want you to know that all of this information has been turned over to the appropriate authorities. The FBI is investigating Brandon Mitchell's business practices, and the city attorney is reviewing Victoria's access to confidential documents. That was a slight exaggeration. I hadn't contacted the FBI yet, but I would first thing Monday morning. I also want you to know that despite everything that's happened, I bear no ill will toward my wife or her boyfriend. They're free to go wherever they want and be with whoever they want. They just can't do it with stolen money or in my house. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. People were shouting support, laughing at Brandon and Victoria, pulling out phones to capture their humiliation. I handed the microphone back to Peter and walked off the stage, moving through the crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea. People patted my back, shook my hand, offered words of encouragement. Behind me, I could hear Brandon and Victoria trying to defend themselves, but their voices were drowned out by the noise of the crowd. They were finished in this town. Everyone would know their story by morning, and small communities had long memories for this kind of betrayal. As I reached the edge of the crowd, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Monica, grinning from ear to ear. That was beautiful, she said. Absolutely beautiful. Just telling the truth. The best revenge always is. I walked back to my truck, feeling lighter than I had in months. The October air was crisp and clean, and the sound of the festival continued behind me, music, laughter, and the buzz of hundreds of conversations about what they'd just witnessed. My phone was already ringing with calls from reporters, lawyers, and curious friends. But I didn't answer. Tonight was for celebration, not explanation. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through downtown. The city looked different somehow, more familiar, more welcoming. Like a place where I belonged. Mrs. Henderson was waiting on her porch when I pulled into my driveway. "How did it go?" she called out. "Better than I hoped." "Good. That girl had it coming. And that Brandon Mitchell, I never liked him. Too smooth, too slick. I walked over to her porch, still wearing my festival clothes but feeling like a different man than the one who'd put them on. "Mrs. Henderson, I owe you a debt of gratitude. That photo you took was the key to everything." "Nonsense. You did all the work. I just kept my eyes open." She paused, studying my face. "What happens now?" "Now I get my life back. The real one, not the fake one I've been living. And them." I looked back toward the waterfront where the festival was still going strong. "They'll figure something out. They're very resourceful people. You're not worried about revenge? People like that don't usually go quietly. Let them try. I've got nothing left to hide, and they've got nothing left to threaten me with." Mrs. Henderson nodded approvingly. "You've grown up, Marcus Sullivan. Your father would be proud." I hadn't thought about my father in months. He'd been a contractor too, a man who believed in hard work, honest dealing, and standing up for yourself when pushed too far. He would have approved of tonight's work. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. For everything. Don't thank me yet. This isn't over." She was right, of course. Brandon and Victoria wouldn't disappear quietly. There would be lawyers, investigations, probably attempts at retaliation. But for the first time in months, I felt ready for whatever came next. I went inside my house, not our house, and poured myself a bourbon. The silence was perfect. No arguments, no tension, no walking on eggshells around someone who despised me. Just peace. I sat on the front porch with my drink, watching the lights of the festival in the distance and listening to the sound of my city celebrating. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight was mine. The joke was finally over. Monday morning arrived with cold rain that drummed against my bedroom windows and turned the harbor gray as gunmetal. I woke up feeling like I'd won a boxing match, tired but victorious, with the kind of deep satisfaction that comes from accomplishing something difficult and important. My phone had 37 missed calls and 82 text messages waiting for me. Word of Saturday night's festival revelation had spread through the city like wildfire, and everyone wanted to know more details, offer their support, or simply get their piece of the gossip. The first call I returned was to Thomas Anderson. "Marcus, what the hell did you do Saturday night?" His voice was tight with stress and concern. "Rebecca Walsh has been calling me since 6 o'clock this morning, threatening everything from defamation lawsuits to criminal charges." I told the truth at a public event. Last time I checked, that was still perfectly legal. The truth according to you. Do you have actual proof of these corruption allegations you made? Every single word. Bank records, property transfers, witness statements, photographs. Nathan compiled it all, and it's absolutely bulletproof. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "Jesus Christ, Marcus. You didn't just burn bridges. You completely napalmed them. There's absolutely no going back from this." "I don't want to go back. I want to move forward." "Okay. Forward means we need to prepare for war. Walsh is going to come at you with everything she's got. This is going to get extremely ugly. Let it get ugly. I've got truth on my side. Truth doesn't always win in court, Marcus. You know that. Maybe not. But it wins in the court of public opinion. And in a small town like this, that matters more than any legal ruling." Thomas sighed heavily. "All right. I'll prepare our defense. But Marcus, no more public statements. No more dramatic revelations. From this point forward, everything goes through me. Understood?" "Understood." "And Marcus?" That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen a client do. "I haven't decided which yet. I'll let you know how it turns out," I said, and disconnected the call. The second call went to Nathan. "Boss, you're famous. My phone hasn't stopped ringing all morning. Good famous or bad famous? Depends on who you ask. Most people think you're a hero. Some think you're a vindictive ex-husband. But everyone's talking about it. What about Brandon and Victoria?" "Brandon's gone to ground. His office is closed, phone's going straight to voicemail. Victoria's apparently staying with Jessica, but she's not answering calls either. They're planning their next move. Probably. You watch your back, boss. Cornered animals are dangerous. I'll be careful.
The rest of Monday passed in a blur of phone calls, media requests, and curious visitors to the construction site. By late afternoon, I was exhausted from repeating the same story over and over again. At 6 o'clock, I drove back to O'Malley's, needing the familiar comfort of the old bar. Monica was working, and she had the local news playing on the television above the bar. My face filled the screen as a reporter recounted Saturday night's events. "You made the 6 o'clock news," Monica said, sliding a beer across to me. "Congratulations or condolences?" "I haven't decided yet." We watched in silence as the news segment continued. They'd managed to get interviews with several people who'd been at the festival. Mrs. Henderson appeared on screen, looking absolutely delighted to be on television.
"It was better than any movie I've ever seen," she told the reporter enthusiastically. "Marcus Sullivan is a good man who deserved better than what that woman did to him." The reporter then cut to an interview with Brandon's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit who denied all the allegations and threatened legal action. "My client is a respected businessman who has been slandered and defamed by a jealous ex-husband," the lawyer said smoothly. "We will be pursuing all available legal remedies." "He looks worried," Monica observed. "He should be. Those bank records don't lie." The news segment ended, and the bar erupted in scattered applause. Several regulars raised their glasses in my direction, offering toasts and words of support. For the first time in years, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere. Tuesday brought unexpected developments. Thomas called early with news. "The FBI wants to talk to you." "About what?" "Your allegations against Brandon Mitchell. Apparently, they've been investigating him for months on an unrelated matter. Your public statement gave them the push they needed to move forward." "When do they want to meet?" "This afternoon. 2 o'clock at their field office." "I'll be there with you." The FBI interview lasted 3 hours. 2 agents, a stern woman named Agent Crawford and a younger man named Agent Martinez, questioned me extensively about everything I knew regarding Brandon's business dealings. I turned over all the documentation Nathan had gathered, along with the names of witnesses who could corroborate the information. "This is excellent work, Mr. Sullivan," Agent Crawford said, reviewing the documents carefully. "How did you obtain all this information?" "I have friends who pay attention. Brandon Mitchell isn't as discreet as he thinks he is. We'll need to verify everything, but this aligns with our own investigation. If even half of this proves accurate, Mr. Mitchell is facing serious federal charges." "What about Victoria?" "My wife. If she knowingly participated in insider trading using confidential city information, she could face charges as well. We'll be looking into that." I left the FBI office feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. I had wanted to expose Brandon's corruption, but knowing Victoria might face criminal charges made it all feel more real, more final. Wednesday morning, I woke to find my truck's tires slashed and obscene graffiti spray painted across my garage door. I called the police, and Officer Rodriguez came to take a report. "Any idea who might have done this?" he asked, photographing the damage. "I have suspicions, but no proof." "This wouldn't have anything to do with Saturday night's festival, would it?" "Probably everything to do with it." Rodriguez nodded sympathetically. "I'll increase patrols in this neighborhood." "And Mr. Sullivan? Be careful. People are talking about what you did. Some admire it, but others think you went too far." "What do you think?" "I think you told the truth. But the truth makes enemies." I spent Wednesday replacing my tires and cleaning the graffiti. Mrs. Henderson came over with homemade cookies and moral support. "They're getting desperate," she observed, watching me scrub paint off the garage door. "That's when they're most dangerous." Thursday brought a restraining order. Rebecca Walsh had convinced a judge that I posed a threat to Victoria, citing the tire slashing as evidence that tensions were escalating. The restraining order prohibited me from coming within 500 feet of Victoria or contacting her in any way. Thomas was furious. "This is ridiculous. You didn't slash your own tires. Can we fight it?" "We can, but it might not be worth it. The order only lasts 30 days unless they can prove you violated it. Just stay away from Victoria and let the legal process work." "Fine by me. I have no desire to see her anyway." Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after my festival speech, Thomas called with the news I'd been hoping for. The city attorney's office has opened a formal investigation into Victoria's access to confidential planning documents. And the FBI has executed search warrants on Brandon Mitchell's office and home. Already. Your documentation was that solid. They moved fast. What happens now? Now we wait. These investigations take time. But Marcus, you need to understand something. Even if Brandon goes to prison and Victoria loses her job, this doesn't guarantee you'll come out unscathed. Walsh is still pursuing the divorce, and she's going to fight dirty. Let her fight. I'm ready. The following weeks blurred together in a pattern of legal meetings, depositions, and media attention. The story had grown beyond our small city, picked up by regional news outlets fascinated by the tale of a working-class contractor taking down a wealthy developer. Public opinion remained divided, but I didn't care anymore. I had told the truth, and whatever happened next would happen. In early December, the first dominoes began to fall. Brandon Mitchell was arrested on federal money laundering and wire fraud charges. The FBI had traced hundreds of thousands of dollars from questionable sources flowing through his shell companies. Victoria was not arrested, but she was fired from her job and named as a person of interest in the ongoing investigation. Jessica, ever loyal, appeared on local news defending her friend, but her words rang hollow against the mounting evidence. The divorce proceedings dragged on through Christmas and into the new year. Rebecca Walsh fought viciously, but Thomas matched her move for move. In the end, Victoria got almost nothing. The house remained mine, as did most of our assets. The judge, clearly unimpressed by Victoria's behavior and the criminal investigation surrounding her, ruled heavily in my favor. On a cold February morning, I signed the final divorce papers in Thomas's office. "It's over," he said simply, handing me my copy. "You're officially a free man. How does it feel?" "Like I can finally breathe again." March brought unexpected closure.
Brandon Mitchell pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges and was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Victoria, having cooperated with prosecutors, avoided criminal charges but left town quietly, moving back to California where her parents lived. Jessica went with her, and I never heard from either of them again. Mrs. Henderson threw a small celebration party when the divorce finalized, inviting half the neighborhood.
Monica from O'Malley's brought a cake. Riley from the gym brought champagne. Nathan and his crew brought enough food to feed an army. To Marcus Sullivan, Mrs. Henderson toasted, raising her glass. A good man who stood up for himself and won. To telling the truth, I added. Even when it's hard. The party went late into the night, filled with laughter and friendship and the kind of genuine connection I'd been missing for years. As I looked around at these people, my real friends, my real community, I realized that Victoria had been right about one thing. I did deserve better. And now, finally, I had it. Spring came early that year, filling the harbor with boats and the streets with flowers. I threw myself into work, taking on bigger projects and expanding my business. The notoriety from the festival incident had actually helped. People wanted to hire the contractor who'd stood up to corruption, who'd told the truth when it mattered. By summer, I had more work than I could handle and had to hire additional crew. Nathan became my full partner, and together we built a business we could be proud of. One warm evening in June, I sat on my front porch with a beer, watching the sunset paint the harbor gold and crimson. Mrs. Henderson was in her garden, tending her roses. Monica was probably getting ready for the evening shift at O'Malley's. Riley would be closing up the gym. My life had become simple again, filled with honest work and genuine friendships. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. The message was brief: "You were right. I'm sorry. V." I stared at those words for a long moment, feeling nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no sadness. Just nothing.
Victoria was part of my past now, a chapter that had closed. I deleted the message without responding and took another sip of my beer. The sun continued its slow descent toward the horizon, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of the evening ferry horn, signaling another day's end. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new stories. But tonight, sitting on my porch in the home I'd built with my own hands, surrounded by a community that respected me and friends who valued me, I was exactly where I needed to be. The joke wasn't on them anymore. It wasn't on anyone. The game was over, and I had won. Not because I'd destroyed my enemies or gotten revenge, but because I'd reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my peace. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. Marcus Sullivan was finally home.